Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach Replay Show. It is May 2023. This is our final month of season 4. And once again, I have one of our great friends of the show, Steve Barkley, on with us. I'm really excited about this conversation today because I think it's just a really powerful one. This month, we're talking a lot about reflection, reflecting for growth, and Steve's going to be kind of bringing in this idea of, how we can support as coaches and the various leadership roles that we might have, our audience members viewing the show, how we might kind of broaden this idea of what coaching is and who does it and the teacher's role within that. So without further ado, Steve, why don't you just introduce yourself briefly for those who haven't seen you on before and don't follow you yet. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Hi, folks. It's great to be with you and great to be joining Corey. We had the opportunity a few months back. We switched roles, and she was on my podcast, which was a lot of fun. I've got a lot of years in education. I've been working in the area of coaching for almost 40 years now, and I have passed the retirement age, but can't go because I got too much to learn.
Right.
Which is, to me, what coaching is all about. I entered teaching in a coaching environment. Did my student teaching for a year in a laboratory school that was just a whole year of being coached, and then started my official getting paid teaching career working in open concept schools with teams. And so as I began to move into teacher training and consulting, I just saw the need for coaching and have been involved with it ever since.
Yeah, I love that. I remember one of your first episodes with us, you talked about how it was going to be your retirement year, and we were in full swing of the pandemic, and you were like, but I mean, it just got interesting. So why would I stop now?
I had to laugh. The other week, I wrote a short blog around Chat GPT, and I thought, whoever would have thought a year ago that I'd be writing something on that on that topic. And I was saying I knew I had a lot to learn, so it definitely is. I did share also that I think this is a very exciting time to be in education, and one of the reasons I don't want to step aside.
I know. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to learn, and it really is. There's a lot of technology out there that's become really disruptive even to our work, both as instructional leaders and coaches, but also as teachers and parents and just everyday people. So I've been talking with a few others about Chat GPT and its role in leadership and coaching, and as we have thought about it for our platform here at Sibme. Sibme powers the Coach Replay Show, and it's really interesting. So, well, let's dive into our topic. So again, reflecting for growth is the focus for this month as we kind of wrap up, right? The school year is ending for most folks who are on kind of that traditional US school year. And it's a great time for reflection if you're not too exhausted. It's definitely time to leverage a little bit of that reflection. And I think you're going to be bringing a really great topic, and it aligns to your background, right? You said you started teaching in a coaching, campus, and so what you're bringing to us is this idea of building a coaching culture. So talk to me a little bit about that coaching culture. Woo, words are hard. Coaching culture. I'll do it one more time just so I know I can do it. And the definition of coaching. You recently had a really interesting interview on your podcast with Michael Moody about this, broadening that definition of coaching. So talk to me a little bit again. What is a culture of coaching,
Well,
and then broadening that definition?
let me back up
Okay.
first to the culture of coaching. The very first book I wrote on coaching, which only took me 20 years from the time I started working on coaching. But the first book I wrote on coaching was called Quality Teaching in a Culture of Coaching. And that book preceded the term instructional coaching. Okay. And my focus when I wrote that book was on peer coaching, on teachers coaching teachers. And that was a lot of my original work. And so if you go back to my experience coming into teaching, always being in that team setting, always being in that open concept setting, somebody was always seeing what was happening in your classroom. And so that led to conversation. And for me, a critical part of reflection is conversation. Okay, that's a little bit of my learning style because I'm highly auditory, so it especially jumped out for me. But it's I think reflection is triggered by others people's thoughts and thinking, taking your reflection much further than you can on your own. So I'll read this just this sentence that I pulled from Michael Moody's writing in Educational Leadership. He said, "If instructional coaching really works, why isn't it working?" That was his title. That he saw it not having the impact that he thought it should have. When we think about instructional coaching, we likely envision a single coach observing a teacher and providing feedback. Perhaps we've been short-sighted. What if instead we broadened our definition of coaching to include several engagement points for teachers? After all, coaching is really about targeted and supported reflection of practice. That was the key term for me, reflection of practice. So I have historically, since getting engaged in instructional coaching, suggesting that the instructional coach in some fashion is really the coach of coaching. So rather than the thought that the instructional coach is the person out doing all of the coaching, I see the role of the instructional coach, along with the coaching they're doing, is spreading that coaching culture throughout a school. So I sometimes describe the instructional coach as being similar to a plate spinner in the circus. So you get a plate spinning on here. This means you pulled 3 or 4 teachers together or 2 teachers together. You've got them working together, interacting with each other. And now the instructional coach sneaks out and go get another one started. And you're looking to get those reflection pieces going throughout the school. And every now and then you're too late getting back, the plate fell, and so you pick up the pieces and you get a new one started.
Well, I mean, that spinning, that plate spinner analogy is a really good kind of visual representation, I think, for what it feels like to be a coach, whether or not you are the coaching of coaches, right? Or you are this short-sighted definition that Michael Moody brought up, where, we're just kind of leaving it all on a single coach to be the one who does all of the observations and all of the feedback. And we've kind of created these separate lanes, and really that coach is, in Texas, we call it the feeder. Other places, I think they call it the access road, right? They're not even on the same highway. They're kind of leading to the access to the highway. And we don't really see them as a unified unit. One of my favorite texts in leadership, and in fact, we created an entire coaching cohort around it here at Sibme, is Creating a Culture of Reflective Practice by Pete Hall and Lisa Simmerall. And they've got a really great diagram. It's a triangle, and it's got the coach at one point, the admin at another, the PLC at the third, and the teachers right there in the middle. And I think that is the perfect representation of this idea that not only am I the plate spinner, but a really good plate spinner who's like really is good at his job or her job is, they engage the audience into that plate spinning act, and they
Yeah.
even maybe hand that stick to another person to hold as that plate spins, right? And so I kind of see that in your analogy and your thought around your philosophy around coaching, that it's not just you doing, but also you supporting.
Oh,
I talk a lot with my coaches about coaching their admin to coach,
oh
right?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And administrators seeing in most cases that there's much more value in the time they spend coaching
Mm-hmm.
than there is in the time they spend evaluating.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working in several schools that are continually focusing on decreasing the amount of time that the teacher evaluation process takes on administration in
Mm-hmm.
order to increase the amount of time that administrators can be engaged in more growth oriented activities.
Mm-hmm.
When I wrote instructional, I'm sorry, when I wrote quality teaching and the culture of coaching, one of the statements I made in that book was that a teacher ought to be able to get coaching feedback once every week.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't but a short time later then Learning Forward came out with a statement that it should be happening every day.
Mm-hmm.
But at once a week, I was raising the issue that there's no way that can fall upon administrator, bring in instructional coaches. It has to be an expanded way that every teacher has some point during the day, whether that's in a PLC, whether it's co-teaching a lesson, whether it's a planning process, whether it's in engagement with curriculum and my coach, but that time and that structure is created for reflection, because the learning comes out of the reflection.
Right. It's you really can't complete the learning cycle without that reflection. My good friend and former colleague Andy McNair, who does a lot around experiential learning and Genius Hour and passion-based learning. We used to do a lot of training on the 4 C's when that was, the big buzzword. So a lot of districts we were working with in our region were asking for that training, and she would always add on an additional, but wait, there's more. What about there's the 4 C's plus 1 R? Like, you've got to have reflection with those pieces. And so I think that's a really important point. And if we also think about sustainability and manageability, one person can't do this. So going back to your point of broadening the definition of coaching, that it's not just a single coach. We've got to include other players, and those players can also be the teachers themselves. That self-reflection should be the primary driver, maybe even the vehicle for the coaching to happen. And we're not just waiting for these, you've only been coached when you get observed and you have this coaching conversation, but that's one of the many ways that we could be coached. So I really like that.
So reflection
Uh-huh.
needs to be taught.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Great point.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you think how often students are asked to reflect on something or to write a reflection,
Mm-hmm.
and when I'm working with teachers in that, before a student can write a reflection, the student has to be able to identify the questioning sequence that they're going to take themselves through that's
Right.
going to guide the reflection. So you're teaching a questioning process
Mm-hmm.
that a person can apply. Well, number one, most teacher schedules, first of all, have no time for reflection. So
Mm-hmm.
it's jammed. We get to the end of the unit and we're trying to reflect back on it. But by the time we get to teach that unit again the following year, it's unlikely we hung
Right.
on to that.
Yes.
So instructional coaches and school leaders need to be looking for ways to create that. So one that I've been working on is getting people to modify the professional growth plan process for teachers, which is usually goal setting, to reframe that instead into a hypothesis that the teacher forms about what would bring about a change that the teacher wants to make happen. And then the teacher's now engaged in a process of implementing that hypothesis and collecting the evidence along the way to make it happen. So an interesting school I'm working with in Germany, it's a K-12 international school. All the teachers have written their hypothesis. And so they're collecting evidence, not evidence that the goal's been met, but evidence that the hypothesis has been implemented. And what am I learning from it? So in this particular school, they formed what they called pods, which are 3 teachers randomly chosen from across the school, K-12, to share their professional growth plans, reflections with each other. So they actually had a randomizer at the first faculty meeting, and it popped out these groups of 3 teachers. And each month's faculty meeting starts with a 10-minute chunk to just sit in that group of 3 and share. Where are you? What are you finding? What have you run into? Well, that's a purposeful structure of reflection.
Right.
It's probably going to draw some reflection time before the 10 minutes at the meeting. Certainly going to draw some reflection time after, and probably continuous conversations. That's the kind of thing that I think we need to look at what we're creating to assist people.
Yeah.
In the reflection process.
Well, and you're correct. And first of all, it makes me think about metacognition, right? That's essentially what reflection is. And it's difficult for our 3rd graders, and it's difficult for our, 30-year veteran teachers, right? It's thinking about your thinking makes your mind just a little mush sometimes. But I do think you're on to this idea that it's a process. And what that tells me is we need to find some consistency. So I think about, like, in the mentoring and kind of mentor coaching work that I do, one of the things that I really like is the collaborative assessment log, which I learned from my colleague TJ Hoffman, who used it a lot in his mentoring work. And it's this kind of 4-question protocol when you check in with your beginning teacher. What's working? What's a challenge, focus, or concern for you right now? What are you going to do about it? And how can I help you? And what I love about that is it starts with the positive. It then addresses the elephant in the room, and then it immediately moves to action and giving control first to the individual. What are you going to do about it? What can you do about it? And then how can I support you in that? So TJ, kind of when he first introduced the protocol to me, said it was like my mentor used it with me so consistently that eventually our check-ins became shorter and shorter, and I would just come. She didn't have to ask me the questions. I would just say, all right, here's what's working for me. Here's something I'm focusing on. Here's what I'm going to do. Nothing you can do to help me, but I got it. So like he was trained to think in that way, and he was thinking not only in the check-in with his mentor, but all throughout the day about that. And that is a really good system, like simple systems. I think about Michael Bungay-Stainer's work on the 7 coaching questions and how much I like those questions. And again, it's about that consistency in helping individuals learn how to do that, not only for themselves, but our leadership colleagues. Can we train them a little bit to pause and prompt reflection before they go into that feedback?
You're describing teaching the questions.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
So I always talked about if you're working with an effective coach, the coach's impact on you way extends the time they actually spent with you.
Should, right?
Yeah. So because what's happened is you're now asking yourself the questions that the coach was in effect asking you. When I've trained mentors to work with beginning teachers, I use the statement, have you all heard that experience is the best teacher? And I say, actually, that's not true. Experience with a mentor is the best teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to have the experience. But what the mentor teaches you to do is they're not teaching you what to do in the situation. They're teaching you how to reflect upon it.
Right.
And in effect, that's what my coach is doing. And now, if you move that to PLCs,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing. If I sit and look at my student work, and I'm looking at that with 2 or 3 other educators, and they're posing questions that strikes this reflective process. Well, later on in the week, I'm looking at student work,
Mm-hmm.
and those questions from my colleagues are still there,
Mm-hmm.
and that's encouraging me to go deeper in learning from the student work that's there in front of me.
Yeah. And again, like that is then taking that coaching is not just this binary exchange between a single coach and a single teacher, but one, I'm going to, with every teacher I engage with, work on building that reflective capacity with them so it can be the vehicle for our coaching work together. But I'm also ensuring that my leadership peers are doing some of the same, and we're on the same highway together. We don't necessarily have to be in the same lane, but we're at least aware. And then when I bring the other teachers in together, right, now that's really a culture, because I've got it at all levels, and we all have that awareness, and we all have that skill of that reflective piece, which I think is really powerful. And you've got some really great blogs and podcasts around this, the peer coaching and PLC, and again around the interview you did with Michael Moody, that we're going to have all of those linked into our notes and takeaways. So I think that's going to be fabulous for anybody wanting to dive a little bit deeper. As we wrap up today, Steve, what are your kind of final thoughts around this idea of building that self-reflection capacity within the building, bringing those PLC, broadening this definition of coaching, bringing those PLCs in to really kind of deepen the coaching work that we're doing? Any last ideas?
I've always pushed that that teaching is a team sport,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore needs to be a public act.
Mm-hmm.
A new piece that I've been differentiating just recently is getting people to think about using the term peer observation
Mm-hmm.
to be different from the term of peer coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I stumbled across it because I started talking to some schools about peer coaching, and they told me they already had it going on in their school.
Mm-hmm.
And when I investigated further, I found out what they had was peer observation, not peer coaching. So
Right.
teachers were encouraged to go out around the school and to visit other teachers' classrooms, and that's a great thing to do. But for
It's just
me,
the first step, right?
well, then it's an okay step.
Yeah.
If you understand that the purpose of that is for the learning that the observer is going to take.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm out observing in other teachers' classrooms, it should cause a great reflection opportunity for me, because when I'm in another person's classroom, I can observe teaching and learning in a way that I can't observe it in my own classroom.
Mm-hmm.
That I can go into classroom, I can pick out 2 kids and focus in on those 2 kids and see exactly what's happening and how the teacher's interaction with the kids is impacting. That causes reflection on the part of the observer. And so for me, in peer observation, any feedback to the teacher who was observed is minimal, and it's probably positive, and it's probably mostly a thank you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
When I switch it over to peer coaching, now the focus is on the teacher who's being observed rather than on the observer. So
Mm-hmm.
now the pre-conference becomes critical for the observer to get really to the bottom of what kind of valuable feedback the teacher would want, and I'm digging in and finding that and giving it to the teacher, and I'm really creating the reflection now for the teacher who was observed. And
Right.
now extra bonuses I can pick up as the coach are less critical. They're there, and they're a valuable a side effect. But I think getting people to see that as two different kinds of reflection
Mhm.
might be helpful.
So, Steve, I think that is a really good differentiator, peer observation versus peer coaching. I think both require some intentional coaching around the process from the coach, right? So peer observation is kind of the easiest step in, I think, to peer coaching. It's the first step, but like you said, it's really the benefit is on the observer and not necessarily the observee. There are some ways that you can make that happen, but I really like how you differentiated and added the, if you're really peer coaching, there should be a pre-conference.
You can't peer coach without a pre-conference.
Yeah, you've got to have some kind of, when you come in, this thing. I think about the observe me movement versus the pineapple chart. Pineapple chart, observe all the things that are happening that are really cool. People are willing for you to come watch, versus observe me. There's usually a set of questions or look fors that the person being observed wants some feedback on. And I think that's a really powerful, simple structure that you could use to begin really amplifying the peer collaboration that happens, right? So I think, again, to me, loving this idea of from your conversation with Michael Moody around, it's not just a single coach, but then also we have to think about the real role of the coach in the building is not just to have that binary relationship with each teacher, but to really be the coach of everyone in the building, to really be that main instructional leader, not only coaching on instruction, but also coaching on coaching at the different levels. Right?
So let's play it out to one higher level yet, and that is, at what point do we begin to bring the kids into the process?
Oh yeah.
I just published a guest blog from a district that I'm working with in Pennsylvania that's doing learning walks, where 3 or 4 teachers are going with the coach. They're visiting 3 or 4 classrooms, and then they're coming back to a substantial conversation, which is extremely reflective on what they saw and what they're thinking. Again, the focus being on the observers, not on the observed. And when I sent it out on LinkedIn, someone responded back, imagine adding a few students to that process. So imagine you're now taking 2 or 3 students on the learning walk with you, and now when you come back and you're just engaged in that reflection process, and then really setting the stage for us to be able to start giving kids the feedback so that they're reflecting on the choices that they're making. That's really the empowerment movement across the board for teachers and learners.
It really is. And I've had a few of our the clients that I've worked with who have taken it to that student level, and it's so exciting to hear, like a teacher who has students record their small group session, one, so the teacher can go back and score them on a rubric of their collaboration, but also first and foremost, those students watching themselves and using that to score themselves and their own self-evaluation, and just the power that has. So I love that you bring in that additional element. And again, like, the adults have the coaching culture, if we do the first part of what we talked about, but you really bring in the entire building, the entire campus then owns that, including the students, and how powerful that could be. Always making me think, Steve, it's like, when every time we meet, I'm like, it's like you're reading my mind. These are the things I'm also thinking about. And then you just take it to another level. So I always enjoy our conversations with you here on the replay show. And I just want to remind everyone, if you want to listen to Steve's podcasts, which are always wonderful, or read his blogs, you can find him and his information on the notes and takeaways, as well as a little bit more into some of these bigger ideas that we talked about today. Steve, anything else for anyone while we wrap up?
Just thanks for the invitation, and as always, it's a great reflection opportunity for me to join you.
Well, Me as well. All right, everyone. Well, be sure to tune in for the final few episodes of the Coach Replay show this season, and look out for some more information from Kim and I on what's to come for season 5. We'll be shaking some things up, and we're really excited about it. See y'all next week for another episode of the Coach Replay show. Bye, everyone.